and welcome to this episode of the Security Journal America's Leaders in Security podcast series. I'm your host, Victoria Hanscomb, and I'm the editor of Security Journal Americas. In this episode, I'm joined by William Knowles, Regional Sales Manager for the Pacific Northwest at Traka Americas. So, William, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Victoria. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you, and it's great to have you here. So before we do get into our discussion today on data centers and data center security, it'd be great if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your role.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So my name's William Knowles, as you say. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for Traka Pacific Northwest region. Been in the role since the start of 2025, having done an account manager role for a couple of years here at Traka USA previous, also in the Pacific Northwest, so very familiar with the territory and its end users, being large data center customers, and some of the challenges that they're faced with and how Traka can help to secure and look after their most valuable keys and assets.
Brilliant. Well, like you say, obviously you look after some very large customers being data centers. So yeah, definitely going to be delving into how we can secure them and keep that infrastructure safe. So first off, I want to ask you a slightly more general question. Why are data centers so important to secure? Why do we need to think about the systems that we're putting in place for these kind of organizations?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Why are they so important to secure? Because data centers, they're so important to secure because they are central hubs where just vast amounts of sensitive, valuable, and everyday critical data are stored, processed, transmitted, as well as that digital infrastructure that houses and looks after all of that data. So the sensitive data storage being paramount, they often house personal information, health records, financial data, whatever it might be, and often highly sensitive, secretive information as well that we don't want falling into the wrong hands. A breach could lead to different sorts of theft, being identity theft, espionage at a very high level, or even national security threats. We really do not want any of that data from any level to fall into the wrong hands. Business continuity as well. Organizations rely on these data centers for their core operations, be that email systems, different cloud services, or even just general customer databases. Attacks or outages on these can halt operations and lead to significant financial loss and reputational damage. And then in the world we're in today, we see more and more increasing levels of cyber attacks and targets. Again, because of that volume and the value of the data that these centers hold, they are prime targets for cyber attacks, something that we need to ensure is being monitored, being kept on top of, and we're actively fighting against. And then lastly, I think regulatory compliance, industries and these data centers have to comply with strict data protection laws. We all see it. We're all faced with that on a day-to-day basis. And poor security in these data centers can, again, lead to legal penalties, loss of trust, whatever it might be that relates to that compliance. So there's just, honestly, I could go on for a long time just on this question alone as to why they're so important to secure. But yeah, it's really, really vital in today's day, in this digital world we live in, that our data is being kept protected and, looked after.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you make a really great point there about, we live in a digital world. So many people rely on this infrastructure and probably without even realizing it. I think the vast majority of people wouldn't even know. And yet, if something were to happen, if that security were to be compromised, then they'd know about it. So, of course, that's where organizations like Traka come in. So, before we start talking about the solutions that then can be used to help data centers, what are some of the major challenges that come into question when we think about securing data centers?
Yeah, another great question. And I think it's important to remember that when we hear the word data center, we're often thinking about data, cyber. What are these challenges that are faced on a cyber level? But even before that, we have to remember the fact that there are a wealth of physical security challenges that come along with these centers and their infrastructure. Paramount at the first and foremost there, and something that tracker systems really help with, is unauthorized access and then removing that ability or challenge of having unauthorized access to physical keys, equipment, and certain areas within these data centers as well. Preventing these unauthorized users or these intruders from physically accessing these servers, cables, other sensitive areas of the infrastructure is so critical to ensuring that the grand scheme of security is kept on top of and is really ticking all of the boxes that we need. One thing that we see as well is complexities with access control within data centers, managing these privileges that these users have, ensuring that only the right people have access to the right systems at the right time is very difficult. And especially on the scale of some of these data centers we see, these are not only national but global institutions. It's really paramount that we are ensuring privileges are kept on top of in real time and with real accuracy. Another factor to consider is the audit readiness, and that kind of ties into that previous point about the compliances. Audit readiness, having constant documentation, being able to test and report are required for these compliances. And it's a real challenge given the volume and the speed in which data centers are growing to ensure that we're keeping on top of these. And then lastly, not only just with those physical challenges, we of course have to take into consideration the network security challenges, ensuring that data center networks are secured and intact at all times, and only the authorized individuals have access to these. We, of course, don't want everyone having access to those networks. We need to ensure we know who has access, when they have access, and what they have access to.
Absolutely. And like you say, that balance between the physical and cyber security, often, yeah, people will just think, oh, it's all about the data and the digital side of things. But no, if you overlook the physical security, then that could be a real issue. So, given those challenges, how can key management systems and intelligent lockers be used to reduce those risks that data centers face?
Yeah, so key management systems and lockers can reduce these risks in a number of different ways. And I'll start with key management systems. Key management systems obviously control the distribution, the access, and the tracking of physical keys, which could be for server cages, secure rooms, these data center racks within these centers, all of these different areas where physical hard keys are still a requirement and will continue to be a physical requirement. What these key management systems do that can reduce risk, first and foremost, the access control and auditing. Only authorized personnel can retrieve specific keys. We can then ensure that only these users have access to these keys at these times. We can add different levels of security to those keys. For example, we can do an item authorization on a key, which is where if one user goes to take out that key, they then have to have a secondary personnel grant them authorization to basically confirm, yep, I know this person, I know they want to have this key and they have access to do it. I'm authorizing them to take it, and as well as this, all of these transactions, anytime a user is logging into our key management systems at Traka, every time they're withdrawing a key, returning that key, this is all logged with time and date stamps, so they have a full audit trail to see that user who took the key or returned the key, and every single piece of important movement of those keys that's happening with them. We can even add features to add logging, notes logging, reason logging. So why are they taking the key? That can be as simple as log in, take the key, go, as well right up to the added special features to ensure we're giving as many layers of security to the key management in these data centers that is necessary. What this can then in turn do is minimize human error. We can prevent these keys from being misplaced or left unsecured. Keys can be time limited or, as mentioned, require that dual authorization, which reduces the misuse and really does help to add in layers of accountability to our keys and our users. Automated alerts is something that we see is very, very popular within data centers, sending out automated email notifications, SMS notifications for pre-configured reasons, which could be, a key has been taken out too long and it needs to be returned. It's broken a curfew, which again just really helps to drive home operational efficiency. That's on the key management side. The lockers very, very similar in terms of what they can do with Traka. These then obviously are just, storage systems that can manage sensitive equipment. It could be different drives, laptops, physical access cards, whatever it wants to be. We can control that access to that hardware, therefore preventing unauthorized removal or tampering with these sensitive devices. We can see and we can control who has access, when they have access, and then we can also add those layers of why are you taking this, what are you doing with this, etc. Again, similar to the key management, we can do those multi-factors of authentication. We get audit trails on every single transaction, and these drives to improve operational efficiency add those levels of security for these data centers and reducing the risks that they face. We can then help to reduce loss and theft prevention. These systems are really impactful in how they not only reduce the risk, but improve different operations and ensure that data centers are secured in means and manners in which, is ticking all of the boxes, like I say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really want to delve a little bit deeper into that point about accountability and auditability. As we've spoken about earlier, data centers are a really important infrastructure. So, yeah, could you just delve a little bit deeper into the accountability side of things for data centers?
Absolutely. So at Tracker, we have a bit of a saying that's accountability breeds responsibility. And it really is true regardless of what, business we're looking at, entity we might be working at. But when it comes to data centers, accountability and auditability, they really are foundational pillars of their overall security in these, critical infrastructures. They ensure that all actions taken, and now that's whether physical or digital, can be traced, verified, and reviewed. That, of course, ties back into that compliance, regulatory compliances that we need to ensure are being monitored, and that data, those reports, are always readily available for review, and to ensure that should there be any mismanagement or slip ups, we have the capability, we have the audit trails to then have the accountability. Clear accountability reduces insider threats, which can be some of the most difficult to detect and prevent. These are often our trusted users, trusted employees. We need to ensure that we have that clear accountability as a result of the auditability as and when it's needed. These audit logs, they provide chronological records of events, who accessed the systems, who took what, when they took it, and why, which again ties into this importance of accountability. We can confirm that only the authorized personnel have access to these sensitive systems. That's what they are. It's not just a key, it's what that key is responsible for. These different rooms where these servers are housed. We need to ensure that, when we're driving home accountability as a result of the auditability, we're protecting what needs to be protected. That's the end goal here.
Yeah, for sure. So thinking slightly broader now, what's a common misconception you think about data center security that you think more people, particularly IT decision makers, should be aware of?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I sort of touched on this a bit earlier, but I'll reiterate the point that, in my view, and definitely from Traka's standpoint as well, a common and often dangerous misconception about data center security, and this could especially be among IT decision makers, is this belief that, well, the infrastructure, the physical security is there. We've built the data center, that's taken care of. So now we need to put our focus and our time and efforts primarily on cyber security. Now, while both of those are equally as important, it's really, really essential that we don't, focus all of our resources on one rather than the other. Many assume that once a data center is, in a secure facility with, it's whatever, it's guards, locks, fences, the physical side is done. In reality, physical security is an ongoing and dynamic risk area. Neglecting it can undermine even the most sophisticated cybersecurity systems that are in place. It needs to be paramount that both the physical and the cybersecurity are in tangent, they're working together. If this isn't the case, let's say that we're focusing too much on the cybersecurity, this can result in, a blind spot, over investing in firewalls, endpoint protections, whatever it might be, while under investing in key control, equipment control, access audits, things like that. That creates a lopsided defense. I think it's important that IT decision makers in particular need to ensure, and what they can prioritize is almost treating keys like credentials. We need to be able to track them, assign them to individuals, have these, check in, check out processes, which an intelligent key management system does for you, so that that level of security is already being handled. And we almost don't have to worry about it because we know it's set up, we know it's in place, we know that it's doing what it needs to do to ensure that our keys are protected and only being taken when they should be and by they should be. Like I said earlier, it's not just a key, it's what that key is responsible for. A lost key essentially can be as dangerous as a compromised password. Managing that physical access with the same discipline as the digital access, is really critical for a secure data center to ensure that it's operating at its maximum efficiency.
Yeah, and like you say, it's what it represents, isn't it? That key can be such a small object, but actually the impact of that, it could be massive if it goes missing. So we've covered some of the solutions there, and some of course, the challenges for data centers. But how do you think that data center security will change or evolve in the future, perhaps in the near future or in the longer term?
I mean, security at data centers, given the world we live in being such a data heavy world, given the ever changing data as well, changing technologies, security at data centers is having to change or evolve, I think is the better word there, rapidly, daily, due to these changes in technology, these daily threats that they can face on many different reasons. That could be growing cyber threats, these advancements in technology, these different means that are constantly being developed to target these areas where data centers, might be at their weaker points and need to ensure that they have their securities in place. One factor, for example, where we're seeing, data centers evolving, we're seeing more ZTNs or zero trust networks being introduced into data centers. And what these allow for, they add additional layers of security by verifying user identities and granting access only to specific resources needed rather than entire networks. And that really is something that I think is it definitely going to be a game changer for the data center world in adding that increased layer of security, evolving to these zero trust networks. I mean, they'll always have to be evolving and changing to keep up with the potential targeting threats that they're being faced with. But what will always be true and has been shown to be true while evolving is the need for all aspects of data center security, being physical, cyber, to work and to integrate together with one another. They can't be separate islands. They need to ensure that they're collaborating, they're working together to ensure that both areas of their security are being handled and managed. This could involve evolving access control environments such as biometric readers, moving away from your traditional card and badge readers, which can be lost and stolen, but actually to biometrics, so your fingerprint readers or even facial recognition. It could be increased layers of integrations between the physical and digital security systems. Traka has many integration partners that we work with already to ensure that our key management and locker systems work and communicate seamlessly in real time with access control providers, which allows these data centers, these end users, not to have to worry about managing one item of security over here, managing another over here. It can become cumbersome having all these different elements. Rather, if these security packages integrate and work together, that really is just providing a much better overall solution to what these data centers are trying to resolve here. And then lastly, I think an area where change and evolution will always have to be occurring in data centers is an expansion and changes made to the regulatory compliances that they're being faced with for real-time auditing. Just as an example, again, some of the data that these locations, these centers are housing and protecting is so valuable and critical. And these compliances, these legalities that have to be followed are essential to make sure they're essential to know that they are being followed, the compliances are being met. Um, so just to name a few there, but the need to change and evolve, to stay ahead of these challenges is an absolute necessity for data centers to ensure their continued success and what they're responsible for. We put a lot of our trust and our faith into these data centers. And again, as you had mentioned, Victoria, sometimes we don't even realize we're doing that. We often don't realize how much data we have out there just as an individual, let alone an entire company, an entire state, an entire nation. It's quite overwhelming when you think about it. So it is so important that these data centers are evolving and changing to meet the ever increased demands and the ever increasing threats and security that they might be faced with.
Absolutely. And, just to pick up on one of your points there, that, it's about making things more efficient and integrated, because at the end of the day, why would we want to make things more complicated? If things can be streamlined, then that benefits everyone, and also helps to make data centers more secure. So, yeah, well, thank you so much, William. I just wanted to ask, if there was one thing that you would like our listeners to know after hearing this podcast, what would that be?
If I could pick one thing for listeners to understand or to know after listening to this, when it comes to key management, asset management with regards to data centers, I think the importance again is just striving home how much data is out there and the need to secure it. It's very easy to just neglect what data is and what data is responsible for, and securing it doesn't have to be as complicated as one might think it would be when you think of, cybersecurity, technology, all aspects of that. It really can be as simple as ensuring that all parties are talking together, both physical and cyber. We're working together from the ground up, that these physical aspects are taken care of, these cyber aspects are taken care of, and that way the data is being secured. I think it can be quite an overwhelming topic, when we look at data and data centers and cages and secure rooms and data racks, whatever it might be. But it's like anything else that you want to protect. It's no different to securing your house or your car. It's ensuring that we understand the problems that they're being faced with and then identifying the solutions.
Well, William, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode.
Thank you so much for having me, Victoria. It was a pleasure.
And thanks also to our listeners for tuning in to the Security Journal America's Leaders in Security podcast. I've been your host, Victoria Hanscomb. Make sure to keep an eye and an ear out for our next episode coming soon.